Hello, ecotopians. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this course. A lot of information about redwoods, a lot of information about redwoods, a lot of background about redwood country, and a lot of information about environmental science. And I come to a part in the class, endangered species in ecotopia, that is particularly difficult for me to cover in a brief lecture. I'll just say that and then I'll do it. But it's just, this is a particularly complex issue, and yet it affects us all directly or indirectly, and it is really important part of ecotopia, so I couldn't teach this class without touching on it. So without further ado, here we go. This lecture is about endangered species in ecotopia. Don't let that background fool you. Those birds probably are not endangered. I can't identify them because shorebirds are really hard to identify. They might be. Snowy plovers are endangered, but these might not be snowy plovers. Maybe these are least sandpipers or something. Check them out. It's a really diverse group, but they're pretty and they're local, and it sort of gives you the background on, like, how would you know if some species is endangered or not? Do you know? Do I know? How would we know? We'd have to go out there and count, and I'm busy. I've got a job. So presumably there's people out there that are paying attention to these things. Maybe, maybe not. You'd be surprised at how hard it is to get good information on a lot of species. However, in this country, we do have some people, some agencies who look pretty hard at it. They certainly don't cover everything, but what they do find is often quite concerning, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So let's start with beginning. What does endangered mean? Maybe it means something to you, maybe it means something to me, but in science and in law we have to really circumscribe our definition. So let's take a look at what that word means. Well, it was defined by, in a way, endangered is defined by the Endangered Species Act, which is a U.S. federal law. So laws have very specific meaning. So if you're going to talk about an endangered species that is endangered according to the U.S. federal law, you have to dig into that law and find out what it means. I've done that for you. I'm giving you a little background about it here. First of all, the law itself was enacted by Congress and signed by good old President Nixon, a Republican, in 1973. And that was a period of the passing of a lot of very far-reaching environmental law. This is one of them. The Endangered Species Act is one of them. The Clean Water Act is another. The law that regulates how landfills, how garbage is dealt with, was also enacted. So really important, far-reaching laws. 1973, and in that law, two words come out. One is threatened, and the other is endangered. And maybe you don't know the difference between those two, but they have specific meanings according to the law that I'm going to cover. But before I get there, I just wanted to say that the listing of the species and their management is done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a branch of the Department of the Interior. Now, look, guys, it is important to follow the power, the legal power in anything, in whatever institution you happen to be in, and whatever government you happen to be subject to or part of. And so endangered species are part of our background, and they are administered by the government. What government? The U.S. federal government, by the Endangered Species Act. And who's doing it? The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a branch of the Department of the Interior. Now, I know who my president is. Do you? I'll bet you do. Do you know who the Department of the Interior, the head of the Department of the Interior is? I do. Do you? You might want to pay attention to that, because that person is channeling the intent of the President of the United States and doing a lot of different things, including administering or managing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So if there's an endangered species in your backyard, you want to know what part of the government is in charge of regulating that. It goes right up the chain to the President of the United States via certain avenues, which I personally think are useful and important to know. I'm not going to name them now, because hopefully this very much hopefully this video is going to outlive outlive the current administration, and soon there will be a new president and new head of the Department of the Interior. These things change with administrations, and with them come changes in the administration of the Endangered Species Act as well as other laws. So I just wanted to say all that to get you primed to thinking about this not just as sort of dry government historical factoid, but something that actually relates to you if you give any wit about endangered species. So in that law, endangered is defined as, like, in brief, and this is quoting from their summary, likely to threatened means likely to be at the brink of extinction in the near future. So it's not at the brink of extinction yet, but it's likely to be soon, whereas endangered means they're at the brink of extinction now. So, in short, endangered is more at risk of extinction than threatened. It's better to be threatened than it is to be endangered. Okay? So, the Endangered Species Act doesn't include just endangered species, it also includes threatened species. What does that mean? Now you know. Sort of. These terms, being at the brink of extinction, now versus near future, are subjective terms. And so it turns out that the listing of species is not strictly a scientific thing. It includes a fair amount of subjectivity and thus is subject to a lot of different pressure, not just scientific opinion, but also maybe political and economic pressure as well. That's pretty significant when you think about it. All right, but furthermore, there's also a California Endangered Species Act, which was passed in 1970. Do you remember when the Endangered Species Act was passed? Yes, you do, because I just told you, 1973. So the CESA, the California Endangered Species Act, was passed first, which is, I'm very proud of that, to be a Californian and know that my state anticipated the federal law. Anyway, this act determines species that are threatened or endangered, those words again, and this is determined by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And if you live in Arcata or Eureka, you have probably seen buildings that say California Department of Fish and Wildlife and vehicles, because we have a fairly strong presence of that branch of the government here in Humboldt County, in this part of Humboldt County, because, I don't know, a lot of reasons. Maybe particularly because we have a pretty strong fisheries, and fisheries are some species threatened and endangered, and so they got to be administered by the government. So that's one of the reasons they're here. All right, there's also an international listing. Now, this is a little bit involved. You don't really have to memorize this first part, but I'm just going to tell you that in 1948, an association of nations and conservation organizations got together and called itself the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Yay for the world. Everybody's cooperating to save the world. Great, 1948, pretty early. And it maintains a red list, a list of species that are threatened or endangered. And this IUCN promoted an act, an international convention, a lot of kind of like a treaty. A lot of nations, including the United States, signed it. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES. I pronounce that CITES, not CITES. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. Anyway, it passed in 1975 after the federal government passed, the U.S. federal government passed the Endangered Species Act, and after California passed its act. So this, I do want you to remember, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Briefly, I mean, it's really cool. It does a lot of things. If you're worried about elephants and rhinoceri and orangutan and other charismatic megafauna and others, then you want to know about this. All I'm going to say about it is that this puts some teeth into the regulation of international trade. So you can't say, I don't know, kill a grizzly bear, take its gallbladder out, take it to China where it's quite valuable, and sell it there with impunity, because if you get caught by, I don't know, the whatever branch of the Chinese government that is involved in CITES, you'll get busted for doing that, assuming China is looking. But anyway, it's not nothing, it's something. So 3 acts: Endangered Species Act, the California Endangered Species Act, and CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Know those three. Know which one was first, which one was middle, and which one was last. Hint, hint. Okay, so that's just some background. And remember, I was just trying to define what endangered and threatened means. Endangered means on the brink of extinction. Okay, so hopefully we're clear. But let's back up even more. Why does this even matter? So extinction is the opposite of species diversity. There is this world with a lot of species in it, and they are going extinct. Many species are going extinct. New species are coming. Well, if you believe in evolution, which I do, new species are evolving, and the fossil record shows that there used to be a lot of other species around that went extinct a long time ago, like the dinosaurs. But the rate of extinction now is quite high, and it's clearly many extinctions currently are being caused by humans. So what? Does it really matter? Well, let's think critically. Maybe it doesn't matter at all. Forget about it. Does I don't know. I'm fine. Who cares? That is a point of view. It's not my point of view. It may be your point of view. You can argue it. And so I wanted to sort of think critically about this and present different points of view. That's a point of view. Here's another point of view. If species do matter. And if they do matter, then the next question is, what is their value? If something matters, then it must be valuable. And that value can be monetary or not. It could be spiritual or ethical. But there is a value. So there's different kinds of value. So how might species be valuable? Maybe they're valuable because they serve humans some way directly. Some examples of that, well, maybe they provide us food. Did you eat food today? It came from species. I ate a hamburger and had a bun. The hamburger came from a cow and the bun came from wheat. And there's some other species involved there too. So that's 3 or more species involved in my food today. My clothing, cotton is a plant. Linen is another plant. Leather is another plant. Timber for building. Jewelry for aesthetics. Medicine to save your life. Tourism. People go to see manatees in Florida, and they spend money, and maybe they're valuable because they're cute. Now that cuteness is sort of an aesthetic, and people are willing to pay money for that, and so there is an aesthetic value which could be translated into an economic value if you wanted to do so. So here are some examples of how other species serve humans. Okay, and directly. But maybe they also serve humans in indirect ways, such as fixing carbon, that is, taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and making wood, and helping to keep the climate steady and not warming like we're doing right now. Maybe species stabilize soils and prevent soil erosion, which could be expensive and damaging and harmful. Maybe species are involved in purifying water. They are. Reducing parasite loads. Want malaria? Then let the bats go extinct, because bats eat bugs. So that's a number of examples of indirect value of species. So what I just covered were, I think of those things as anthropocentric. That is, how do species, how do they have a value to me, to humans? That's anthropocentric. That's selfish. Okay, we're one of 10 million species on the planet. And we're right now in my discussion here are saying how all those different species can benefit us. Well, they'll probably also benefit each other, and maybe they have an intrinsic value. That is, just by existing, there's some intrinsic value to them that has nothing to do with whether they serve us or not. And I am trying to maintain an unbiased presentation here, but every now and then in this class I give my opinion, and I'm going to give my personal belief and opinion here. You don't have to have it. I'm not putting this on you. However, let us consider this. Just to be frank, I basically worship species diversity. I've been born on this planet. It has the most amazing things on it, and to let species go extinct seems to me one of the worst sins, I'll use a religious term, a worst sins that could possibly happen. I'm not particularly religious. I don't identify with any of the main religions. However, many people do. And if you belong to the Jewish tradition, if you're some Christian denomination, or if you're Islamic, you believe in the book of Genesis. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all accept the book of Genesis as a fundamental basis of their belief, and that is creation. God made the everything in 7 days, and I think on days 3 to 6, God made all the plants and all the animals, and he made everything. And so everything, every species out there, according to that belief, is a creation of God. And to let that creation vanish because of our own selfishness or our own ignorance seems to me pretty insulting to God. Now, the Old Testament does say God allowed man to have dominion over this species, and if dominion means letting them go extinct through ignorance, I guess that could be your interpretation, but it seems nuts to me. So I just say this to give you an example of how, if you're religious, then you might consider species having an intrinsic value separate of what they do to humans. My personal belief is does not have to do with Genesis. It's more like evolution has given us incredible species diversity, and every species, from the lowly mosquito to the most charismatic panda bear, is the product of millions of generations of evolution and exquisite adaptation to their environment, and is intrinsically beautiful. And to let that go extinct, so I dedicate my life to doing whatever I can against it. Let me move on, because that took a little bit more time than I wanted to do. I just wanted to make that point strongly, that there is an intrinsic value. Could be, maybe you don't believe that species have an intrinsic value, but maybe others do. Anyway, if you say species have a value, then how do you weigh the value of a species or its loss against human freedom and monetary wealth? Because really, it's human behavior that leads to a lot of species extinction. Our behavior is based upon, we want to do what we want to do, and we want to get rich, maybe. And if species are in our way, so be it. So if you believe there's an intrinsic value or not, a monetary value to species, how do you weigh that against this other thing, human freedom and monetary wealth? How do you do that? Tricky. So let me just ask you some questions. Is your life diminished by the absence of the passenger pigeon? I'm going to say probably you haven't thought of the passenger pigeon in a long time, or very much at all, and so you don't notice its absence. Okay, what about the grizzly bear? I'm going to guess, and please forgive me if I'm generalizing. I know I'm talking to 1,000 different people and there's diversity among us, but most of us are probably afraid of bears because we've never seen one. We don't know anyone who's ever been harmed by one, but our culture has taught us that they're dangerous, and so we're glad there's not grizzly bears walking around in our backyard. So maybe your answer there is no. How about elk? Well, I know some people who go elk hunting, and if they were gone, they would be sad. I don't really see elk that often. I don't notice they're not. What about bighorn sheep? No, I don't. What about old growth redwoods? Well, there's 5% left, 6%, 4%. I kind of feel diminished when I think about the loss of old growth redwoods. I wish there was more. What about old growth Douglas fir forests? That's we had this whole course is about redwoods. Guess what? There's other species. Douglas fir is far more widespread than old growth redwoods, and is host to a lot of species that are not in redwoods, and yet they are just as diminished as the redwoods, if not more so. So I'm starting to feel kind of diminished. But what about all these other guys? These are all species that are on the California endangered species list: the delta smelt, the amargoso. And you could go down and answer this question: is your life diminished by the absence? And go, no, 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 no. But how do you really know? I mean, if they were around, if they were thriving, your life might be different. It might be richer. So if you keep on going down this long list, and it really goes a long way. Currently, there are on the U.S. endangered species list, there's 1,459 animals, 948 plants, zero fungi, protozoan, bacteria. I have an issue with that. I don't have time to get into it. Anyway, all these animals and plants are on the U.S. endangered species. Also, please be advised, these are just the animals and plants that made the list, that went through the gauntlet of scientific, economic, and political pressure to keep them off the list. So my belief is that the true number of endangered species in the United States is much higher than that. Is your life diminished by the absence of them? Well, I don't know. It just seems to me to allow species go extinct and you don't even know what they could be doing for you. Probably our lives are being diminished by this loss of species. Am I preaching again? I hope not. I hope what I'm saying is rational. Maybe I am. I'm sorry if so. But I just wanted to give you guys a sense of all these species. Plus, I'm sure almost none of you can list all these species or are familiar with them. And so I just wanted to give us all a sense of our own ignorance at the scale of the problem. It is big. It is worth looking into in your life. It's worth paying attention to endangered species and asking yourself the question, does it matter? And if the answer is yes, then that may have consequences for the way you live your life. Not just on how much gas you burn and how much stuff you put in the garbage, but also in your political behavior, like your choices on which candidates to support or not. If they support protecting endangered species, then you might go one way. If not, then you might go another way. So, but I did want to give you a sense of the scale of the problem. I hope I have succeeded at doing that. Okay, let me also give you, I'm trying to be even-sided, so maybe what this seems like is Murphy is saying, hey, there's a lot of endangered species, we need to stop them because they're great. Well, it's actually not that simple, because as you'll see, there are some practical implications of listing a species. The first ones are obvious. Well, yeah, if you list it, it could lead to recovery and protection from extinction. For example, the bald eagle, which was on the endangered species list, our national bird, almost went extinct. Well, we passed the Endangered Species Act, we banned DDT, we protected some habitat. It's doing pretty good now. Peregrine falcon's another success story. So that's good. Also, I just wanted to say that an endangered species can act as an umbrella species. That is, one species can protect a lot of other species from the horrible reign of extinction. Preserving one species might preserve an entire habitat type, for instance, old growth coniferous forest, and by extension, all the species in it. So, good for species. The individual might be protected, and by protecting it, you might protect a lot of species, but if you have this thing called the Endangered Species Act, this could lead to government regulations that are burdensome to timber industries, hydropower utilities. They might flood out fish habitat that go extinct. Construction companies that could be making money developing land that has endangered species on it. Cannabis growers, because they do stuff that often harms some endangered species. Or in general, any individual or group involved in natural resource use or degradation. So there are a lot of people involved in natural resource use. That is a big part of human economy. And so you're passing a law that's going to restrict their activities. And so that is viewed as burdensome, as government intervention, as inappropriate use of government, and it leads to pushback. So this conflict that's sort of built into species protection has led to politicization of the Endangered Species Act and associated environmental issues. So it seems kind of odd to me that something like this, well, I guess it's not odd at all that this becomes politicized, because you might have a side that says, look, we just don't want any government involved, we just want to do whatever we wanted, and another political party says, no, we're going to protect it, and they start doing battle with each other, and that's what happens. Clearly, that's happened. It's really strange sometimes because basically what's gone on is Democrats have embraced the Endangered Species Act. Conservative Republicans are against it. Conservative Republicans represent a lot of things, including, for instance, individual freedom and family values. And it's kind of funny because, and many rural people identify more Republican than Democrat. And yet many rural people are much more familiar with the species around them because they live outside. They have a certain amount of what's it called? They get their food off the land more than urban people do, and so they're much more connected with wild species than urban people are. And so you would think that those folks would be much more concerned with preserving endangered species and sustainable use than urban people who shouldn't give a shit. So, but that's not the way it plays out within the sort of tribal aspects of politics. Another issue that I really don't have time to go into, but I just wanted to point out this is a real thing, and if you pay attention to it over your lifetime, you'll see push and pull having to do with endangered species protection. And I just want to just point out a few things that I have heard. One is the SSS philosophy, which is the shoot, shovel, and shut up. If you find an endangered species like a spotted owl or a timber wolf on your property, then just kill it. Kill it, get rid of it, and don't say anything about it so that no one says it's there, and so you can do whatever you want on your property. Because if if the federal government should become aware that there's an endangered species on your property, they're going to come down like the FBI and tell you what you can do and what you can't do, and screw that. So shoot, shovel, and shut up. It's really the sad approach to endangered species. There's the timber war issue, which we really didn't go into much in this class. Sometimes I think we should have. That there was some big civil disobedience in Humboldt, well, in the Northwest, trying to preserve the last few remnants of old growth redwood, and it pitted people who wanted to preserve species and preserve old growth redwood from those who wanted to develop it. And one of the weapons, if you will, in that war was the endangered spotted owl, which I'll say more about later. But it became kind of a symbol. The spotted owl became a symbol of environmentalism and preserving redwoods. And people who hated this timber, who wanted to continue to harvest old growth redwood, they started hating the spotted owl. It became a silly thing. I just wanted to say there's a really excellent article on the so-called timber war in some of the reading I've given you this week, and I hope you look at it. It's by Greg King, who's a friend of mine and a longtime advocate of old growth redwoods, who's involved in the redwood summer, and he wrote a book saying timber war. There was no war. If a war is supposed to have two groups fighting each other, but the environmentalists never harmed anyone on the other side. I'm not sure that's totally true. They spiked some trees, but I don't think they blew up anybody's cars or felled trees on anybody. That's his point of view. I hope you read it. Also, and there's this student who once told me that environmentalism ruined Eureka because he felt like it was environmentalism that caused the collapse of the local timber trade, which is an issue I bring up in another lecture. Okay, anyway, let's get to the best part of the lecture. What are some of the notable endangered species in Ecotopia? I've got some species for you to learn. Not all of these, don't worry, but there's some plants, some birds, some mammals, and some fish. And actually what I want you to do is learn one plant, one bird, one mammal, and one fish for your examination. And I'm going to go show you pictures of these and say a little bit about each of them, and then you can study them on your own and hopefully enrich yourself by learning some of the endangered species in Ecotopia. And I'm also going to mention a few other species that are not strictly inhabiting Ecotopia, but they might someday, and they're worth noting, and I'll tell you why when we get to it. So let's look at some pretty pictures. Plants. These two plants, the Menzies wallflower, and if you want to spell it right, Menzies apostrophe. No S after that. It's after a guy named Menzies, and that apostrophe makes it possessive, and he has his flower. And the other thing is, you can call it beach tidy tips if you don't want to say beach leia, which is harder to say. This is my picture. This is Doreen's. I've tried to give attribution appropriately for once. And where do you find these, and why are they endangered? Well, you find these on the coastal strand in the dune area, and they are endangered for a couple of reasons. One is that dune habitat is actually fairly rare in California. Most of California is rocky coast without dunes. Secondly, where there are dunes, they have often been developed. Developed why? Because people want to build golf courses and condominiums, and when they do that, they destroy the plant habitat. Thirdly, they're endangered because of the introduction of European beach grass, which has come in and just forms a dense monocrop. You've seen it if you've been to the beach. Nothing, almost nothing but European beach grass grows there. But you can find these here every springtime. I go out in the dunes and I look at some of the restored areas where there's no European beach grass, and they are there. I'm not going to tell you exactly where because I don't want you to go picking it and destroying it. But use your own resources. You can find them, and they're beautiful. They're fun to see. There's the spotted owl. So the spotted owl nests only in old growth western coniferous forests, including redwood forests and Douglas fir forests and others. And so as that habitat has shrunk, so has the population of the spotted owl, to the point where it was put on the endangered species list because it was on the brink of extinction. And because of that, that really kind of sparked a lot of it became one of the things that really encouraged people to preserve the last remaining old growth forest, but that set up sort of a battle between the timber industry and the preservationists. And that culminated in the Northwest Forest Plan, which I believe is covered elsewhere in the class. Since then, you haven't heard much about it. The Northwest Forest Plan designated a lot of land to be old growth, which wasn't old growth yet. Hopefully, as time goes on, but it's going to take hundreds of years for old growth to develop in places that have been previously cut over. But if this species can persist and the old growth fills in, shall we say, then we would expect its population to raise. It's not that simple. It turns out some other owl, western barred owl or something like that, is coming in and out competing and hybridizing and causing a mess with the spotted owl. So I don't know what's up with it yet, but it's there. If you want to get a job, you can learn how to make a spotted owl call, and then you could go out, you could get hired by Green Diamond or maybe the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and go out at nighttime and make the spotted owl call and listen, and do that all summer long. And that's how they survey for spotted owls. I have a friend who does that, and it's an insane hooting sound. I wish I could make it, but I can't. Google it. The marbled murrelet, more recent addition to the Endangered Species Act, and the spotted owl also inhabits old growth forest. It's a silly bird. Most of the time it's out on the ocean fishing, but it nests on these old snags in old growth forest. And it comes, so it's ridiculous. It can fly a long way, I don't know, 5 miles from the coast into its nest, and then regurgitate fish for its babies, and then daddy goes fishing and then comes back and mama goes out, and it's a horrible plan. They should nest on oceanic islands, but I guess that room was already taken. So they are also on the endangered species list. And then another one which has nothing to do with the forest but does with the beach is the western snowy plover, another silly bird. Well, it lays its eggs on rocky, sandy beaches, and they're perfectly colored, so they blend right in, which is a great strategy until humans arrived with their stupid ATVs and their dogs and hiking all over the place and building golf courses. And the poor little bird's nesting area has been shrunk a lot, crushed, and in areas around here, such as the South Spit of Humboldt Bay and also around Clam Beach, you'll find areas where dogs must be kept on leash during the nesting season, because dogs run and chase birds and they'll kill the little babies that crush the eggs. So it's around here. Pay attention. It's not really doing so well. And a lot of people are trying to restore its habitat, but European beach grass, hard to deal with. Really pretty though. Then some mammals, just two mammals for you, the fisher and the Humboldt martin. These two creatures are in the mink family. You know, mink, like mink coat. They are the fisher. Actually, the fisher is doing good. It's just locally, it's not doing so good. It has a habitat. I think it's around the northern hemisphere in cold coniferous forests, including in I think Europe. I'm not so sure, but certainly into Canada, east and west. So it's got a lot of forests, but it's in Washington, Oregon, and California. It was completely eliminated for two reasons. One is that's a lot of soft fur, so it was trapped. Valuable. People make money off of that. It was trapped out. Also, habitat loss. Again, old growth forest clear cutting, so habitat loss. It was reintroduced into California, Oregon, and Washington after it was extirpated, and I guess some of the timber pressure was down. Maybe better laws passed to control trapping, and the fisher is back. But it does tend to eat, for instance, rats that have been poisoned by illegal rodenticides, which pop up on the big grows up in our mountains around here. And so cannabis growers, some of them have been using illegal rodenticides to keep the wood rats out of their pot gardens, and then the rats get poisoned. These guys come by and eat it, and then they die. So that's bad for the cannabis growers. The Humboldt martin is a wonderful success story. It was thought to be extinct. It's so cute, a little kind of mink thing, cute until it opens its mouth, and it's a feisty little beast. These guys are fierce predators. These little guys can kill things much bigger than themselves. They're related to badgers and wolverines. Don't mess with them, but they do look cute. Anyway, this guy was thought to be extinct, and then oh my gosh, they found some. It's those cameras that are motion sensitive. You can put them in the backwoods, bait it, and then come back every couple of weeks and download it. That really helped in monitoring wildlife, and so they've realized these guys are still around. Old growth forests is what they need. There's only a couple hundred of them estimated in California. Just recently made the I think the federal endangered species list. So that's great. Hopefully they'll get the protection they need, in my humble opinion, and they thrive again. Those are the only two mammals, and you only need to learn one of them. Let's talk about fish for a second. We got three fish I want to talk about: coho salmon, Chinook salmon, and steelhead. Now, none of these are at risk of going extinct throughout their entire range. But what I didn't say about the Endangered Species Act is that it applies to populations, not just the whole species. Because the reasoning is, if it's just species and something's endangered, well, you could just establish a zoo population or population in one little area and eliminate everything else, and that would be fine. And that was not the intent of the Endangered Species Act. It was more to keep a species intact throughout its entire range. And species, as you know, exist in distinct populations, fish especially. So, for instance, the coho salmon that go up the Klamath River are probably a very distinct genetic population from the coho salmon that go up the Columbia River in Oregon. And so in some areas they are on the endangered species list. It's a little bit confusing to me to try to figure out how they're managed, but I found that the coho and Chinook and even steelhead are on at least some endangered species lists. I know that coho is very rare locally. And I just wanted to give you a picture of them. You notice coho, when they are in breeding, they turn bright red. And I was lucky to see in a local tributary of Jacoby Creek within the city of Arcata boundaries, coho salmon spawning, which means I'm so proud of my community because we are able to manage a watershed such that this rare and endangered species can spawn, can live and reproduce, and we haven't fucked it up so badly that it's gone extinct. So I'm proud of us, and I wanted to share with you a video that I took of this happening, of them actually spawning. Let's see if I can do this. This is up that creek. It's a tributary of Jacoby Creek. And I'm going to let this run. This is going to go for 2 minutes. If you get bored, you can fast forward through, but I'm going to shut up and just watch these two fish. There's a dark one that's a female and a reddish one that's a male. The dark one, the female, she's making a little bed for her eggs, and the male is flirting with her and hanging out to the right time. And when that time is right, he'll squirt sperm all over the eggs. They'll be fertilized, and then the adults can go die, and their babies will persist. There. Pretty awesome. I hope you could see that well enough. Note also that they have really different forms. They are anadromous, that is, they have saltwater stages where they go out and eat mackerel and stuff, get big and fat, and then they come up their streams freshwater. And when they do that, their body changes a lot. They form this big hooked snout, and they turn color, and they also lose their digestive system. They don't eat a single thing once they enter freshwater. Okay, that's coho salmon, much more common locally, but still carefully managed. Are Chinook, male and female. I think when they're raised in hatcheries, this adipose fin is clipped off. So if you catch a large one, you know whether it's a wild one or a hatchery one, and sometimes you're not allowed to keep the wild ones. So you have to only keep those that have the adipose fin clipped off. And I just want to show you the picture of steelhead, which this is an enormous steelhead. Really popular. This one looks like it might be wild too. Locally, I think you're not allowed to keep the wild ones at all. Got to throw them back. But there's quite a few hatchery raised one. The Mad River Fish Hatchery raises steelhead, clips off their adipose fins, drops them in the river, and it's really popular along the Mad River to catch these steelhead when they return. Okay, so three fish. Now we're almost done. I just wanted to list a few other species, three other species to consider because they might be in redwood country someday. First is the wolf. Maybe you've heard that the timber wolf was extirpated from the lower 48 states of the United States. There were none. And they were reintroduced into Yellowstone, I forget, in was it the 1990s? Maybe the 1980s, and the populations did really well. They had babies. The babies went out, formed new packs. They left the park. They started going into Idaho, Oregon, Washington, I think, and lately into California. There's been a wolf spotted, and I think has established a pack in far northeastern California. So that's happening. There's a lot of tension between the people who want to conserve, that is, to bring the wolves back, and livestock ranchers. It's especially because these guys might prey on their livestock. So there's some pressure, there's some tension there that spills over into the political realm sometimes. Stay tuned for that. The other is the sea otter. I wanted to mention the sea otter because once upon a time the sea otter was quite common up and down the coast, all the way up into Alaska and down to LA, the LA area. And they live, one of the things they eat, excuse me, are sea urchins, and but sea otters have nice warm coats and their fur is very valuable, so they're trapped nearly to extinction. When that happened, the sea urchins overpopulated, and then the sea urchins gnawed away the kelp, and then the kelp disappeared. And kelp is this huge, very important primary producer in coastal ecosystems, and without the kelp there, it has huge changes to the ecology. Well, there are still some sea otters and they're protected, but they're having difficulty thriving. There are no sea otters in Humboldt County on the north coast, although I think a carcass of one was found some years ago, but certainly we don't have an established population. Periodically, you might go down to, say, Trinidad, and off the pier there see sea otters, but what you'll see there is probably river otters, which are fairly common, and you can see those. I see them in the Mad River fairly frequently. Notice the difference that river otters have this big, long, muscular tail, and sea otters have a short, little stumpy tail. And overall, I think the sea otters are much larger than the river otters. So if you see an otter, pay attention to their tail. And also maybe go to Wikipedia and find some other identifying characteristics and pay attention. I would be very, very happy if sea otters could sort of get over this bottleneck they're going through and expand their range and get back up here to the north coast. If we're lucky, someday that will happen. The last species I want to mention is the California condor. Used to have a quite broad range, but for a variety of reasons, it almost went extinct. They ended up trapping all the remaining condors and bringing them into captivity. There's only, I can't remember, a couple dozen that they did that, and that's male and female. They had to breed them, and they did that and successfully, and then they had to release them back into the wild, which they have done successfully, although it's been a very difficult and very expensive process. But there is a proposal to reintroduce the California condor into the Klamath River watershed. And so it's not impossible that someday you can go hiking in the Trinity Alps or the Siskiyous and see this vision someday, and a wolf someplace, and then go down to the river or down to the ocean and see the sea otters. So that's my hope. I think that would be very cool. Okay, we're almost done. I just want to be clear with you guys. Okay, so what do you got to know for the test? If you're not from the East Coast, I'll translate that. Okay, so what do you know? Got to know. What do you have to know for the test? Just want to be clear about that. First, those two words, threatened or endangered, which one is closer to extinction, which one is farther away? What were the three levels of government that have laws protecting species from extinction? Well, international, federal, and state. And what are they? Well, California has the CESA, and that's administered by these guys. USA has the ESA, and that's administered by these guys. And international has CITES. And I said these were first California, yay, first USA, then international third. And yeah, I might ask a question about this complicated branches of government and the abbreviations. What do they mean? What does CITES mean? Might want to have that written out somewhere when you take the exam. Be prepared to state how you value species extinction or their existence, and how you weigh and judge the value of species against that of humanity's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, I went off on a little thing there. I hope you pay attention there and don't just parrot Murphy, but come up with your own point of view, your own honest point of view. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about that. List one practical application of listing a species. Okay, I gave you a list of those. Think of that and maybe be able to list one. Should be easy. Name one plant, one mammal, one bird, and one fish that is a species of concern in California. I just gave you a list of a bunch of them, and in this case, I'm going to require you to spell it properly, and if you misspell it, you will get 0 credit for it. It takes me a lot of time to go through everybody's exam and give them partial credits for misspellings. This one time, I ain't gonna do it. You spell it right. There's no reason you can't do it, so do it. All right, Canvas is gonna be mean to you, and I'm not gonna correct it. Okay, and lastly, be familiar with the material covered on the wolf, condor, and the sea otter. Okay, Well, hope I didn't go on too long. Hope you learned something about endangered species. I hope you think about them more than anything else. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.